think you would like. It's called How to Think Like Socrates.
I am pretty sure I'd like it just from the title. Yeah.
Yeah. And
what do you take away so far?
Well, it's really interesting. This author, he's also written a book called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, which is around the life of Marcus Aurelius. And he talks about how a lot of the origins of CBT, of cognitive behavioral therapy, are coming from Stoicism, and even before that, like Socrates and his line of thinking. And the book is pretty funny. It just basically like follows these different points in Socrates' life. So one thing that is crazy is he never actually wrote anything down. And so a lot of his life is just kind of gone. Plato wrote a bunch of stuff, and he was a student of Socrates. And so that's kind of where we find a lot of the history. But it basically just goes through different like stories in his life where he just like owns people. Like he just like goes through this like line of questioning where they're like, yeah, this is true. And then he's like, well, and then he starts asking him question. And then by the end, they're like, what the fuck? Okay, nothing I know. Like, I don't know anything.
Yeah, the Socratic method. That's like, such a cornerstone of classic CBT. Yeah.
And so, the part I just read is he talks with this guy who's I think it's pronounced a sophist, like Sophocles, sophist, sophist. I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I've seen that in print too.
Yes, but this is like a group of people who, at the time, they like claim how wise they are, and they're this like higher class of people. And Socrates is kind of like, that's bullshit. Like that's like his whole thing is like, if you think you're wise, you're automatically kind of not wise, because a wise person is aware of their ignorance.
Right. Yeah.
And so they have this whole debate about what, can you teach virtue? That was the whole debate. And Socrates starts on the side of you can't teach it, because this sophist guy is saying like, oh, this is what I do. I teach virtue to people. And then Socrates does this like roundabout way of owning this guy, where he almost like tricks him into this realization that by his line of thinking, you cannot teach virtue. And so then Socrates ends up on the side of you can teach virtue. But at the same time, he like shows the guy like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
That's fun.
But it's very cool. His whole point is like, virtue is all wisdom. Wisdom is virtue. And the really interesting piece of that was he was saying someone can be courageous in like, they go into battle and they're heroic and they're doing the thing that they think will bring them glory. And then there could also be someone who doesn't know like, oh, if I go into battle, that will bring me glory. So then they run away from that. Both of these people are just driven by different things. Right. The only difference is one of them has more wisdom of what actually the good thing is. Yeah. So everyone's kind of driven by fear or positive, either direction. And it's just the wise that is the virtuous.
I want to read that. That sounds really cool. This is my framing of it, and maybe Socrates would totally school me and show me that I'm completely wrong. And that would be so much fun if I could go back in time and have that experience. I would. The way that I've framed when I think about wisdom, and I talk about wisdom and therapy or whatever, the way that I've come to understand that concept is, it's a knowing for me, a knowing that comes from my experience. And so it's not something I'm going to get from reading a textbook or listening to a lecture. It's something that happens in my understanding experientially. And from there, that idea of values, I totally agree. If I'm understanding his perspective right, I also would pair those things together in that our values or virtues, if you want to use those terms interchangeably, also are developed based on our experience. So our wisdom that comes from those experiences. So I see it every day when I'm sitting down with a new client in therapy, and we're talking about their life history and experience that brought them to where they are. The examples would be something like, someone who had a really rough childhood and went through a lot of trauma or adversity, and maybe they had parents who could be, really abusive or neglectful. And now they've become a mother or a father. And you start to talk about those experiences and ask them, what kind of parent they want to be. And so much of the time, doesn't mean that they always execute it the way they intend to, But you'll hear, I don't want to be like my parents were. I want to give my kid what I never got to have. And that's so, and you ask, like, what's the most important thing to you? What matters most to you? And you hear that over and over and over again. That's the thing. I want to be better for my kid. And that valuing, that virtue, the strength of it is in equal measure to the strength of the pain that they experienced. They weren't going to learn to be this kind of parent and really internalize it and feel it in their bones because they read a parenting book. They're going to learn it from that experience. So can you be taught it? Maybe you can be taught it if it's an experience that is teaching you and not someone, at a podium in a lecture hall. So I don't know if that aligns with maybe.
Yeah, there's a much deeper wisdom that you acquire through experience as opposed to just reading or taking it in from someone else's, taking it in from a non-emotional standpoint.
Right. Yeah. Emotion is such a key piece of it.
And I think that's one of the reasons that we learn through fiction more than nonfiction a lot of the time.